Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I am Bruce.
And we are here to talk about casual things, like casual Magic, and talk about it casually.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 85. 85. We're halfway through our season, so that means we got a little Temple's Treasures for you. And for those who don't know, Temple's Treasures, we look for cards that are underplayed because they're just old and people don't know about them.
Right.
Or because they're not that great. But they've got their niches, and that's what we like to make shine here. We put a little polish on them and be like, look, this card is interesting, right? And then usually I look at them afterwards and go, yeah, maybe I could have chosen better, but hey.
I think Andy's underplaying it a little bit. These are decent cards, but they're decent cards in the right deck. And that's kind of the key. I mean, if we're talking about an older card that is not getting played in decks, then it's likely a kind of a card that would go in a particular deck. So just something to keep in mind. But when we say underplayed or not played in a lot of decks, we're looking at EDH rec. So we pick our cards and we try and pick cards that are in less than 2,000.
2,000.
Less than 2,000 EDH decks.
And first printing before 8th edition?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and with a lot of these cards, you're going to find that they don't tend to have a lot of printings after 8th edition, because if they do, odds are they get played in more decks because more people see them.
Yeah.
So some of these you're going to find are going to be like, oh, they've got like one or two printings, and just sort of, they're weird and eclectic cards, and I like them.
Yeah. First couple seasons we did this. We did enchantments of each color.
Yes. And
then now we've been making our way through sorceries because they are less played as well. So we figured it'd be easy. So far we've done white, black, and green. Not in that order. So this week we decided, hey, let's do red sorceries.
Yeah.
I emphasized, how little play these got. It was or how easy this would be. But I mean, Bruce, what's I know how my experience with this was. How was your experience?
All right, so the thing to remember is that we're talking about older cards, and with older cards, a lot of the sorceries especially were sort of formulaic. They either destroyed a land, or it was some kind of direct damage, and it was variations on the theme. So, just straight up destroy a land. How about a non-basic? How about you do X, Y, and Z, and then you get, and then it turns into another destroy land, or you can destroy a creature, or just a player, or you can get an X spell that does creatures and players, but you pay extra for multiple targets, and all kinds of stuff like that. But that was the theme. It's, destroy a land, do damage to some kind of permanent. And that just seemed to be running over and over through sorceries. And so I found it a little more difficult to try and pick, just because, well, in multiplayer, a sorcery that does damage to a creature is generally not something I'm really looking for. I want something more than that, because I want, if I'm going to deal damage to a creature, I don't want to do the damage until the creature's attacking me. And the sorcery isn't going to help me with that. So I want instant speed damage if I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're better off just with a way to destroy, or you want to get rid of the creature without having to do damage to it, because there are so many ways to stop the damage. And a lot of times if the creature gets too big, then doing enough damage to the creature with a red damage spell ends up costing way more. Or the spell itself only does, however much damage, and that's not enough to kill the creature. So it can be kind of dangerous going down that route a little bit. But
Yeah, and kind of along the same lines too. I keep, whenever I do this, I always keep forgetting this crucial point. But just because all of these cards are old and not great doesn't mean that all old cards aren't good. Like, there are good red sorceries, but they're being played. They're in more than 2,000 decks.
Right. We're not here. I'm not gonna run Insurrection on my list. This isn't a card that people don't know about. You know about this card. It's in a lot of decks. Now, maybe there's an issue as to whether or not it's still considered a good card because of the cost, but everybody knows about it. So it's not a card that's going to get there. And I find that a lot of the red sorceries that did something a little bit off the beaten path tended to be cards that were well known and popular. So
yeah.
Having said that, I did pick 5.
Yeah. I also picked 5. We'll see if there's any overlap. We'll see if we even get to 5, time permitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, without any further ado, let's jump right in. I'll go first.
Sure.
My first one, I've got plenty of copies of. It's Tomgarths Glare. It's for a single red, so it's sorcery, obviously. Look at the top 3 cards of target opponent's library, then put them back in any order. That player looks at the top 3 cards of your library and puts them back in any order. It is currently in 76 decks, which is approximately 0% of the 789,000 possible decks that it could be in. This has very niche. I started with this one because it has very niche use case. Obviously, it helps if your opponent is doing top of the library shenanigans, and you just want to get a look-see. Or, honestly, it's a 1-mana sorcery. You can use it to get your storm count up. It's practically free in any sort of decks that are utilizing Burgi, because you're getting that red mana right back.
Right.
But the thing that this made me instantly think of was decks like Atali, things that make you exile the top of everybody's library type thing, and then you get to play it.
Right.
So like with Atali, you can set up one of your opponent's decks, and if that opponent is feeling a little friendly that day, they can help you set up yours. Obviously, that part doesn't matter too much, but with Atali, you do get whatever is on top of their library, as long as you play this first main phase.
Right. Tomgarths Glare is also nice if you already know that, like if you've got a particular card hand that's going to let you flip over a number of cards off the top of your library, and maybe you get to play one of them or whatever, however the exile is set up. Then the order doesn't matter to you. So in the end, all that's happening here is that I get to mess with the order that you're dealing with, and I'm just going to flip over those top cards. So.
I just love cards like this because, like, I feel like this especially is the epitome of cards that your opponents will just be like, wait, what? Why are you playing? What? And it's not even necessarily like that sneaky. It's just kind of like, all right, if you want to use a slot for that, sure.
Yeah.
But generally, you have an idea of what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah, and like you said, I think quite often, this is one of the best times to use this is really when you and one of your opponents are in desperate need of an answer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a nice way to have, to set up the top 3 cards of your library and your opponent's library to try and maximize how this, how it's going to go. The difficulty, of course, is that if you're in that situation, you're usually looking for an answer right away. So you're looking at the top 3 cards of your opponent's library and basically giving them the best thing that you can find, because you're probably in a position where that you may not get to that second card. So
right,
so it could be limited use. And really, I mean, if one of the cards is garbage, the best you can do is drop it down to the third spot as opposed to getting rid of it. So, I get the limited use, but I do see the upside on this one too. So,
moving on, what's your first one?
My first one is Boiling Seas.
Ooh,
we talked about land. I mentioned land destruction. I'm going to go hard with the land destruction. Boiling Seas is 3 in a red. Destroy all islands. This isn't a card that's going to let you destroy all islands. It says that it will, but it won't. Because if somebody's got enough islands out there that you're willing to play this card, because you're not playing this card to get rid of 1 island or 2 islands. You're playing this to get rid of a chunk. You wanna take that blue player and really chop the legs right out from underneath them. And that would be the reason that you'd be playing this. Well, as soon as they've got that kind of mana, this is all this card says. It's a 4 mana. It says this spell's getting countered. They will have somebody. One of the blue players at your table is going to have the counter for this. They're going to dodge it somehow, some way. So when you put it in your deck, put it in there with the assumption that you're drawing out a counter spell with this one.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, if it does cash in and you actually do get to destroy all islands, good for you. But just be aware, if you're playing this card and that happens, you better have a follow-up. You better be able to finish this game, because you have just taken anybody who's a primarily blue player and just you've put them almost out of the game. So if they get to stay in, you're dead. If I'm the blue player, I've got 1 target for the rest of the game. And it really doesn't matter at that point whether I win or lose. That's where I'm going over and over. So if you play this card, be prepared to follow through. You really want to be able to hammer home right after that. This is no different than Cyclonic Rift. If you're going to play the Rift, you better be able to follow it up and win. So if you're going to play Boiling Seas, you better be able to follow it up and win quick, because you're not you're leaving your opponents in a terrible state for the rest of the game where they have to try and build back up. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it by saying that this is almost like literally just to bait out the counter. Yeah. And I think it is one of the best cards to do that with, because like so often cards that you want to play just to bait out the counter like are so that you play it and then maybe they'll counter it, maybe they won't, and like if they don't counter it, like things are still okay.
Yeah.
But like with this, if they don't counter it, they're screwed.
Yeah.
There is no holding off on the counter for them.
Right. They have to counter. The only time a blue player doesn't have to counter this is if they're running, if they're 3-color deck and they're only losing, say, 2 islands. Then maybe they can get away with not countering it. But trust me, even if they could counter it, even with only the 2 islands, they probably will counter.
Yeah.
This is land destruction. Almost every casual group hates land destruction. You will likely be hated by definitely the blue players, maybe other players as well. This thing comes with strong repercussions. I mean, yes, it's not Armageddon. You're not destroying everybody's lands. You're not destroying all of the lands. But destroy all islands is a powerful statement, and you better be prepared to back it up. You have to be prepared to back it up. So,
yeah. Yeah. What a fun thing.
What a fun thing. And one other piece, for those who tend to see cards that are very focused. So, for those who would say, "Oh, Boiling Seas, why would I play that? If nobody's playing islands, it doesn't do anything." Yeah, sure. And if nobody's playing creatures, then your removal doesn't do anything. Trust me, somebody on your table is playing islands.
Yeah.
Somebody is. Almost guaranteed somebody else is playing islands.
And if it's that one night that nobody's playing blue, like like the next game will, like, it's so rare for somebody not to be playing blue.
Right,
So.
right. It just is. So, and also keep in mind, as a lot more people are starting to get the duels, and by duels I mean lands that list both of the basics, like the Ravnica duels that list both of the basics. And a lot of the newer dual lands are searchable, so you can search for an island and you can find any duel that lists blue or lists island as one of the options. A lot of the older duels were just, here's a name. They didn't have a basic attachment, so those ones would still tap for blue and they wouldn't get destroyed by boiling seas. But nowadays, most duels have both names on them, both basic names, and they'll get caught up in the boiling seas disaster for blue. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those wondering, this is in 418 decks.
Yes.
According to EDA Trek, of course.
Yeah.
My next card is actually 2 cards.
Ooh.
You'll see why I chose 2 cards.
Okay.
I've got Gitu Fire and what's the other one? Caravax Torch. They both are a red and X, and they both say when you may play this card anytime you would play an instant if you pay 2 generic more to play it.
Yeah.
It deals X damage to target creature or player. So, essentially, it's an instant at 2 and a red and X.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you don't need to do it at instant speed, at sorcery speed, it's just red and X, which is amazing.
Right, and
it's flexible, which is where I need it.
Yeah, and I will note that while the card says target creature or player, the Oracle text says to any target. So this will hit the planeswalkers as well. So
very nice.
Yeah.
I've played with Caravax Torch before, and it does the thing you want it to do, and nothing more.
Mm-hmm.
Just as you would want out of a red direct damage spell. I feel like this and Route get looked over fairly often because they're sorceries. But for 2 mana more, why wouldn't you want to play it as an instant? Just to have that flexibility.
Right. The joy of this one is that, you can play it at instant speed. The only downside is early on, when you're playing it the first few turns, you're essentially you're stuck with a sorcery. I mean, you're not going to try and play this at instant speed unless you've got at least 6 or 10 mana on the board.
Yeah. This would be great in obviously any Is It Spellslinger's decks, any big mana red decks, and I think that you don't want to use it really early game. This is good for obviously player removal, or any pesky creature removal, but this is almost always do X damage to player.
Late
game.
And you're right, because this is almost always going to be the late game. If you're using it early, you're desperate. Gitu Fire to do 3 damage at instant speed costs 6. If that's what you're looking for, then let me introduce you to Lightning Bolt, which comes at a significant discount. No, you're playing Gitu Fire because you're waiting for that. You're waiting for the late game when you've got a pile of mana, or you've created 15 or 20 treasures.
Yeah, red does treasures very well.
Right, and this is the sort of spell where you just pour it into that spell and just do significant damage. So, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
I love it.
I ran Caravax Torch quite a bit early on. I found that it was an effective way to get rid of a lot of the larger creatures in the late game. Because at that point I would have 12 or 15 mana, and if I can spend 10 of it at sorcery speed, I can do 9 points of damage to a creature, and it was often a great way to get rid of that creature that was gumming up the works, and then just pour in with a pile of other creatures. Or maybe I had one other big creature and I just needed to get around that thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also goes really well in, oh man, what is that called? Heim Legendary. Toralf, God of Fury.
Okay.
Toralf says whenever a creature or a planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. So if you have Toralf on the battlefield, you can pump Caravax Torch up as big as you want, and the excess just continues to roll over to other targets. And eventually you can wipe their board and use the regular excess after that to just hit face, which is excellent.
Yeah, that is excellent, and that works especially well with some of the more well-known early X spells like Fireball, because Fireball also always asks you to pay one more for each target beyond the first. Well, with Toralf out there, you just spend X and it just gets around that whole tax on hitting more.
Especially with our friend from a couple weeks ago, Fire Emancipation.
Right.
The numbers get crazy.
Yes.
That's what was it? Gitu Fire at 185 decks and Caravax Torch at 552. Yeah.
Nice. So I just finished saying how we get a lot of direct damage. We just saw Gitu Fire, so I went with something a little bit different. Spitting Earth. Spitting Earth costs 1 and a red, and it says Spitting Earth deals damage to target creature equal to the number of mountains you control. Obviously, we're looking at mono red decks. Much like Gitu Fire, I think this is a card you really only want to play in the late game. Unlike Gitu Fire, it just doesn't take a lot of mana, so you can go that route. The difficulty with this one, of course, is that it says target creature. So it's not as though you're going to get to do 12 points of damage to an opponent. You're going to do that damage to a creature. So it's it was just a nice way to get rid of some of those mid-range creatures that are causing you issues as you go through, because this is going to do as much damage generally, assuming you're hitting your land drops. This thing ramps up as everybody else ramps up.
Yeah.
So in the early game, it might only do 3, but that's probably all you need to get done. So,
right. So very infrequently, people are going to be playing, X6s for 3 mana.
Right.
This card makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And you just mentioned Toralf, allowing it to jump from. So if I've got 12. I can do 4 damage to 3 different creatures, or 3 damage to 4 creatures, or however I want to split it up. And that's just a huge benefit, and clearly not something. I mean, this was not meant to be something that was supposed to get rid of multiple creatures. It was some kind of mass removal. The idea was that if you had 8 mountains and somebody's got their 4/4, well, you're going to do 8 damage to it. So it's a bit of overkill, but it gets the job done. But with Toralf, I mean, this really does spread it around, and things can get pretty ugly real quick.
Yeah, so, it's a great little card.
Yeah, and I like that it costs 2. So you spend 2 mana to do 10 points of damage. You're not spending 10 mana to do 10 points of damage. Now you've still got 8 mana left. Well, now you can still offer up that X spell. So this is a great card if you're on your way to a storm count. So.
I think that's one of my favorite things about sorceries in general is that they are just so cheap.
Yeah.
Because obviously any counterpart in instance is going to be more costly, if only because they're better. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, but yeah, Spitting Fire. Oh, and I should mention Spitting Fire. Sorry, I keep saying Spitting Fire. It's Spitting Earth. And it's in 418 decks.
Very nice.
On EDA Trek. So, and this is one of the ones that's in a pile of options. So you've got Portal, 6th, 7th, 10th, on and on and on. So
all the way up to, I believe, Jumpstart.
Yeah. Yes, it's in Jumpstart as well.
how about I do, since we're each doing 5.
Yeah.
How about I do 1 and then we go to break?
Sounds good.
Cool. So my next one is Shatter Storm. So you've heard about treasures, right?
Oh, yeah.
And how they're breaking the format. Well, for 2 red, we've got a sorcery that destroys all artifacts. They cannot be regenerated. So obviously this gets rid of everyone's artifacts. So that's why it's not being played very often. But this wipes the board of these overcosted legendary artifacts. It also gets rid of treasures, which is excellent. Obviously, in response, people will sack them for mana, but you're forcing them to use them, which is amazing.
So, Andy, I will say, I thought this was in more than... when I saw the card, I just assumed that it was in too many decks and did not include it. This should be an overlap in our list. It should be. It's not, because I goofed. But yeah, no, this is...
this card mana. This card is 4 mana. It's in 948 decks.
Right.
And it's had reprints through the roof. So, very easy to get your hands on. And especially where, like, what is it? The one with Overload.
Yeah.
It's got a little goblin. What's it called? Vandal Blast.
Thank you.
Especially where, like, Vandal Blast is still, like, $5 card. Like, this essentially does the same job. Obviously, Vandal Blast doesn't hit your own stuff. But in a deck where you're if you're playing a deck that you're not playing that many artifacts in, this is just as good, if not better, because Vandal Blast is 5 mana to Overload.
Yeah.
It's sick. Shatter Storm, man. I don't have much more to say about it. It's good card that should see more play.
Right. Now, I know that a lot of red decks do use a lot of artifacts. So, if you're ramping with treasures, you will want to consider that when you're playing Shatter Storm, because you're going to want to make sure that you've used up your treasures before you cast this. But
but that's the thing too, is that you are controlling when you play it. So, like, having it in your deck isn't necessarily bad, except if you don't know how to play it, Right. So obviously the turn you're going to play it, you're going to pool up all your mana and do it. And
I will say if you think Vandal Blast is good enough to be in your deck, then do you want the same effect? Or practically the same effect for 1 less mana?
Right.
With
better art.
Well, and there's all kinds of art for Shatter Storm, so you can take your pick. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I just love the Broken Chalice. It's great. It's a great card.
Absolutely.
Oh man, there's a Invocation version of Shatter Storm. Nuts.
Oh yeah.
The Amonkhet. That's wild. Yeah. Anyway. That's all we got for Shatter Storm. We've got 5 cards left. So we'll throw it to break real quick, and when we come back, we'll finish off this list. So we'll be right back.
This episode of Temple of the False Pot is brought to you by Seize the Day. Oh, no, wait. That's in too many decks. This episode of Temple of False Pot is brought to you by Dragonstorm. No, wait, that's in too many decks. I got it. This episode of Temple of False Pot is brought to you by Browbeat. Oh, wait, no, still too many decks. Hang on, I'll get there. This episode of Temple of False Pot is brought to you by Acidic Soil. No, that one still doesn't work. This episode of Temple of False Pot is brought to you by all those red sorceries that everyone's really excited about and is already playing. Back to you, Andy.
Hey, And we're back, and we've got some more cards for you.
Nice.
Welcome to Temple's Treasures, the latter half. We got some ladders for you, and red sorceries. We're talking about some underplayed old red sorceries that can sometimes have some cool niche use case. That's it. I believe we left off, and you were about to show us your third one.
Yes, my third one, Lava Blister.
Sounds awful.
It sounds awful. The card's pretty good. So for 1 and a red, you get a sorcery that says destroy target non-basic land unless its controller has Lava Blister deal 6 damage to them. So this card suffers from the same issue that all cards like this suffered from. When you give your opponent the choice, they choose the option less painful for them. So if they have a non-basic that you really want to get rid of, they're not going to do it. They're going to take 6. If you're targeting a non-basic that they don't care about, it's towards the end of the game and you would prefer to see them take 6, they're probably going to sack the land. Now, having said that, this is 6 damage for only 2.
Mm-hmm.
I like that option.
To the face, yeah.
Yeah, 6 damage to the face. So to me, worst case scenario is 6 damage to the face. Because, say what you want, in the early game, everybody's going to take the 6 damage. Because nobody's giving up a land that taps for mana in the early game. It's just too heavy a hit. And in the late game, by then, you're targeting a non-basic. You're probably not targeting something because of mana. You're probably targeting something because it does something else. Whether it's a Maze of Ith, or it's a Gaia's Cradle, so it taps for a pile of mana, or some kind of special non-basic that does something more than simply tap to produce a mana.
Kessig Wolf Run.
Right. So, to me, this is a card that just says, take 6 to the dome. Forget about that destroy target non-basic land. It's doing 6 to the dome. That's what's going to happen here. Because I don't believe even in the latest game that you're going to be targeting a non-basic that they don't want to save, because you're going to go after something that does more than just tap for mana. That's the way it's going to go. Whether it's, it can be something as simple as giving your creature double strike, or whatever else the land does. They're going to want to keep it, and they'll take the 6. The only time they don't take the 6 is if it kills them. So, I think I like the card, but I like the card because it says it's doing 6 to the dome for 2. So.
Oh, absolutely. This kind of card is I love giving your opponents the choice, because either choice is bad for them, obviously, but usually the either effect is better priced on this card,
right?
And like you're getting a deal regardless, and they're getting the lesser of two evils for them,
right?
Which is still a benefit for you.
Yeah, there's a reason. The mana value on these cards is lower because you're generally not getting what you want. You're giving them the option, so they get to choose which is the less painful option for them. So it's going to have to cost a little bit less to make up for that, for giving them the choice. So I like Lava Blister for that, because I don't really feel like this is a card that offers a choice. You're just taking 6. So
yeah.
Lava Blister is in 276 decks on EDHREC. So just another interesting card. I can see this, it fits the theme for political decks, where, making your opponents make decisions. So
nice. Yeah. I like it. My next card, also requires your opponents to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Illicit Auction. For red 3, it says, each player may bid life for control of target creature. You start the bidding with a bid of 0. In turn order, each player may top the high bid. The bidding ends. If the high bid stands, the high bidder loses life equal to the high bid and gains control of the creature. This effect lasts indefinitely. I saw this card and I was infinitely intrigued. I don't know what you would do this for. You're just... somebody is gaining control of somebody else's creature and losing life for it. I'm just like so intrigued by all the possibilities that this could wind up being, and on top of it, it's just kind of... it's goofy. I don't know.
This, as someone who's played this card a few times, most times what I find happens is I'm looking at a card that's a linchpin for an opponent's deck. This is, choose target creature. I'm choosing an opponent's commander. Their entire deck revolves around this. They have to have it, and they're going to pay any amount of life to get there. It's just the bidding just starts around the table. This is particularly fun when you're targeting an opponent who has less life than somebody else. If you've got, if an opponent if the opponent you're targeting has, say, 27 life, and there's another opponent with 40. Well, if the opponent with 40 starts bidding, and there's nothing that says that the bid has to go up by 1 life each turn. So the player with 40 can it's like 1, 2, 3, 7. I'm going to go 7. You're going to have to go to 8. I'm going to make you pay. And if I don't like, and 7 could just be my first offer. I mean, I've already got a number in my head as far as how high I'm willing to go. And suddenly things can get really, really ugly for that player. I mean, this is essentially stealing somebody's creature, and you're getting it. I mean, this isn't theft for a turn. This is a blue effect on a red card. Yes, it is. It really is. But
it's fun. That's why it's red.
Right, and it's a cool sub game. And like I said, I think every time you play this, you can look at the board. You can look at the board state and sort of look at it and decide, how is this going to play out? Because honestly, even if the player who controls the card has the highest life total, if I've got 25 life, maybe I'm willing to go to 15. How high are your other opponents willing to go? Like, are they willing to risk their? At what point is it like? I mean, everybody knows who wants it the most, but how much are you willing to risk? Because at some point they may call your bluff and just be like, "No, I'm out," and then you're left holding the bag with a pile of life. So, I've seen some, and I've played this, and I've had it whiff, where I played it and did not accurately predict how the board was going to work out, and ended up having no one who was willing to pay. Because my second bid was 5 life, and no one else was willing to go over that. I'm like, oh, I guess I get the creature for 5 life, and put myself into a position where, like, I did not expect that I was going to be losing 5 life.
Yeah.
But
this feels like the type of card, too, that goes into a deck alongside, say, like Master of Ceremonies, where you kind of have to play up the table. You have to, like, be campy about it. You have to, like, put on a character of, like, an auctioneer and, like, really call it out and kind of go for it.
You do?
Because otherwise it just, like, there's a game to it, but people can take it a little too seriously.
Right, and it does say proceeding in turn order, so get on your auctioneer's hat, one after the other, and honestly, even turnover on the table, the turn order around the table can affect how well the bidding goes. Because
Oh, definitely.
if the wrong, if your high bidder is the first person that you're going to, they have to make sure that that somebody's going to raise them at some point to push the life totals up. So it's this card is great fun, and I do enjoy it when it comes out, especially if your deck is a deck where it's clear that you are able to recur the card, so that it's obvious to everyone this is not going to be the one and only time we're going to be auctioning off a creature here.
Yeah.
So that's always a lot of fun. I love this card.
It's a great little one. I believe you have 2 more, yeah?
I have 2 more, yes.
Okay. Let's go to your next one.
All right.
Oh, yeah. And for those who don't know, this is in 1628 decks. 1628.
Nice.
Yeah.
My next card is another 2-mana sorcery. Stronghold Gambit.
Okay.
Stronghold Gambit. Each player chooses a card in their hand. Then each player reveals their chosen card. The owner of each creature card revealed this way, with the lowest mana value, puts it onto the battlefield. So you play it for 2, and then it becomes a question of, do your opponents have creatures in their hand? And how cheap do you think those creatures are? So this played in the early game, you're likely going to have to play a creature that costs 1 or 2 mana to actually get it onto the battlefield. So not that much of a return. You probably could have just played that creature. But when we get a little farther into the game, when people aren't playing out a creature every turn, this could certainly be interesting, because you can play the 2, and then you're looking at your 4 mana value creature, thinking to yourself, is this going to be low enough? Will this be good enough? And there's always, at that point, you start looking at the game as far as, how expensive am I willing to do? And on the other hand, everyone is revealing their card. So you get to see cards in hand as well. So that's not something to be sneezed at. It's nice to know which creature they're going to play out, because there's always going to be at least one opponent who's just not going to play along with this game. No.
Yeah.
I'm going to play I'm going to show you my expensive 7-mana creature, and if I get to put it on the battlefield for free, that's great. But otherwise, that's that. But I recommend you play along with the game. So
yeah. What I love about these past 2 cards is that it just does that. It involves the table. Like, somebody's not just having a turn to themselves where everybody's just waiting for the turn to end. This is, everybody gets to participate as much as they want to, and if they don't, that's their own fault. Yeah.
I always love the mini games. So cards like Illicit Auction and Stronghold Gambit, these are the kind of cards that appeal to me.
Yeah.
So, Andy, I think you got one more.
I do. As do you.
Yeah.
I wonder if we chose the same one. Mine is 2 and a red. Sorcery, obviously. It's called Panic Attack. It says up to 3 target creatures cannot block this turn. It doesn't have to be the same owner or controller. Yeah. And 3 could very well be most of, if not somebody's whole board. So, realistically, this could be, make sure the one that you're worried about doesn't block, and then you're pretty sure they're not going to block with the other ones unless they absolutely have to. Or, I was going to say you could use it on somebody else's turn, but it's a sorcery, so never mind. But this really does help out with a lot of the more concerning creatures that are on the battlefield. 3 is a lot, especially for 3 mana. I love cards that make things not be able to block. I don't know. I just love cards like this. There's another one. What was it called?
What I love about cards like this is that it really messes with people like me who plan out how many blocking creatures I'm going to need.
Yeah.
So if I've got, 6 or 7 creatures and I'm like, okay, I need to have 3 there to block, assuming they can mess with one of them, so I'm going to keep 4, which lets me have 3 creatures I can swing with. Now, which creatures can I swing with? Where can I go? Blah, blah, blah. That's done. I have my 4 creatures that can block. And now suddenly I have 1. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
Now, the other benefit of this is that this doesn't say that those creatures get tapped. They can block. They can block later. I mean, you get through. No one else does. So this isn't a I'm going to tap your 3 creatures, and now everybody's going to take a turn, smashing into you because I have left you wide open. You are very much controlling how much damage and how much they're going to pay. If those creatures can't block, well then I before you even do this how much you're planning to swing in for. So I like that you get that level of control, whereas otherwise it's kind of open. And maybe you intended for your opponent to take 10 and now suddenly they're taking 25, and maybe that's a little bit more than you had intended. Hey, I get it. You were trying to kill the opponents, but maybe the plan was to sort of level things off a little bit as opposed to wiping them off the board. So,
yeah. The card that this made me think of is one of my favorites from the War of the Spark era Ravnica stuff. The card is from Guilds of Ravnica. It's called Cosmatronic Wave. For 4 mana, it deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control, which, obviously hits a lot more, and creatures your opponents control can't block this turn, which also is a little bit more than just 3 creatures. But sometimes, all they have is 3. There is a point of diminishing returns here that Panic Attack is just as good.
Right.
And I think that being able to choose the creatures too is always good. Obviously, it's not just 3 creatures your opponents control that they choose, which was never the question. But I think I think for 3 mana it's an efficient card that will let you get in with your tramply big boys easy.
Right.
So without worry of any sort of death touch, you can stop and stuff. So and this is only seeing play in 125 decks.
Man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I am going to wrap things off here.
Ooh.
Andy, you recommended Shatter Storm as one of your cards.
I did.
And Shatter Storm is destroy all artifacts. So, yes, it gets your own artifacts, but it wipes everything, and it only costs 4.
Mm-hmm.
What if I had a card that didn't cost anything? Let's look at Pulverize. So Pulverize, it has a mana value of 4 red. But you're not paying 6. That, I guess you could, but you're not going to. Because in the card text it says you may sacrifice 2 mountains rather than pay this spell's mana cost. So you sack 2 mountains, don't pay 6, and destroy all artifacts. It's a free card. It's free. Because the mountains that you're sacrificing, they can be tapped. So you've already got the mana out of them. You can float the mana, do something after you've cast the spell. You can do something before. It doesn't really matter. It's the ability to do this without paying anything. I think is very handy. Now, this is not a force of will. This isn't a card that comes out of nowhere. You see your opponent's tapped out and you think, I can do something. Because this is a sorcery. So your opponents are not going to look at your board and say, oh, look, Bruce is all tapped out. We can now do stuff on his turn. Because, come on, it's my turn. You're probably not waiting for me to run out of mana to do stuff on the middle of my turn. So it doesn't have that same wow factor and coming out of nowhere that a card like Force of Will or other, free instance has. But it is free. You're not paying the mana cost. So you're not paying that 4 that you would pay for the Shatter Storm or the 5 for your Overload. You're paying 2 mountains. If you're using this card, there's a very real chance that you're planning to wrap this game in the next couple of turns. So in theory, losing those 2 mountains is not going to cost you in the long run. However, if you're paying the 2 mountains because you need to play it early and you really can't afford the 6, you're going to want to take a long, hard look at whether or not you really need to do that, because you're putting yourself so far behind doing it. You really do want to be winning this game fast. So I picked Pulverize. That was my final pick.
This matches well, too, in certain color combinations like black and red, where, especially lately, we've got cards that do certain things when artifacts leave the battlefield or enter the graveyard or something. Like Marionette Master from, I believe, Kaladesh. Says, like, whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So it becomes kind of a helpful piece in that artifact aristocrat strategy.
So you're saying it's
which is also great.
It's a reason not to sack your artifacts? Not to sack your treasures?
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying, this is perfect for sacking your...
Because every treasure now does how much damage?
Yeah, 1, but unless you've made Marionette Master large.
Okay,
and I think the great thing too is like it then turns Pulverize into a win con in itself rather than just a card that will help you stabilize. So excellent card.
Yeah,
and that is in 147 decks.
Yeah, this is a low number for a card like this. I appreciate the reason why. Like I said, this isn't a card you're going to want to play early. You're going to want a ton of mana out there if you're playing this, because even on turn 7 or 8, if you've got 7 or 8 mountains and you lose 2, that puts you behind for the next round. You really do want to have a way to finish this. You're sacking those 2 mountains to wipe out artifacts in the hopes of wiping out their defenses, preventing them from doing whatever was going to happen on that next turn that was going to kill you, and then you're hammering in. And you have to be coming in right away because you are putting yourself behind with this card. So, yeah.
For sure.
Pulverize.
Man, I just love talking about red cards. I could talk about them for hours.
Well, we just talked about red cards for an hour.
Yeah, that's true. But I think we both talked about... I think we both talked about 5 cards
We
each.
did.
But that would be a lie. I talked about 6. I just love these episodes. And we hope you do too. But I think that without much festivity here at the end, I think we can quickly wrap things up. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Just, we talked about, the limited range of red sorceries back in the day, but it's not really that limited. Most of the ones that do something different tends to be the ones that are the more popular ones. So we're not really going to talk about them. So, Seize the Day or Dragonstorm or Insurrection. These are all great cards, but you already know about all these. So there is variation in a lot of these older cards. It's just when you get a card, especially an older card that does something different than usual, everybody tends to perk up and tends to know a little bit about it. And Wizards is usually kind enough to repeatedly print it, hopefully right into the ground. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the next half of this season.
Yeah.
Getting closer to 100. But I think that'll do it for us this evening, or whenever you're listening. Today, this morning. It's 4 o'clock here, I don't know. But I'm going to let Bruce go have some dinner.
Sounds good.
But thank you so much for listening. We're Temple of False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
Again, thank you so much for listening. Share us with your friends. Have a great night. Play some Magic for me. And may your 5th land be the Temple.
Bye!
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter at falsepodmtg. Bruce is at ManaBurned, and I'm at Andy Weekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the Temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!